I recorded this originally to be more thematic in my lounge room area on a couch, and I'm re-recording it because I look like I had no neck, and I'm not really about that because I do actually have a neck and I do like to show it. Or rather, I didn't have a chin and it was all just like big neck. So to keep it sort of a little bit more thematic, I'm gonna film it on my bed because I do watch more movies in my bed than I do on the couch. And I watch this movie on my bed, so it makes more sense and is more realistic. I just realized I've been filming this whole video and I haven't been wearing makeup. Oh well. I'm not re-recording this a third time, so there.
My name is Turkish. Funny name for an Englishman, I know.
Hello and welcome to my very first film review on Coffee Nurse. Exciting stuff. So a few days ago I watched Snatch, which was a 2000 movie made by Guy Ritchie. I watched it because a friend from work recommended it to me, and I've seen Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels and it's like one of my favourite movies, and it's also by Guy Ritchie. In my last video I said Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels a lot, so let's just keep a running counter to see how many times I have to say it in this video, because unfortunately the two are very comparable. I say unfortunately because I do like a bit of variety in what I watch, but whatever. More on that later. So if you're not familiar with Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels or with Guy Ritchie, he tends to write very intricate plot lines that involve more than one storyline and multiple characters. And this movie is no different. In the beginning, we are introduced to Frankie Four Fingers, played by Benicio del Toro, or Benicio, unsure. He steals this really expensive diamond that's got like a crazy amount of carats in it, and his storyline is determined by the people that try and steal the diamond off him and like what happens to him. And it's all about like the different people that have the diamond, all this sort of stuff. And then we have this other storyline that's about these two people, Turkish, played by Jason Statham, and his friend Tommy, who are trying to pay back this like gangster boss called Bricktop, played by Alan Ford. They work for this underground bare knuckle fist fighting like boxing ring thing, and they piss him off because it's like fixed. They have to agree to have this fighter that will go down in a certain time in the match, and then like he gets knocked out and killed by this bare knuckle fist fighter in a gypsy camp. And then we get introduced to Brad Pitt's character, Mickey One Punch O'Neill. He doesn't quite comply with the rules that they're looking for, so they have a lot of problems with Bricktop, because Bricktop loses a lot of his like punters and stuff, because then like the rink isn't fixed properly and they're not getting their money back on their bets and all that kind of stuff. And that side of the story is a little bit more about gangster, that kind of gangster life, and Bricktop and how he sort of will like kill anybody to get what he wants sort of thing. Yeah, that's a very basic summary of the plot. Basically it's just these like two stories and like a bunch of characters that get involved. So I just get into my feelings about the movie and things like that. I think I will try and break down each film that I watch in the future, and this one as well, into like 4 different categories, like cinematography, including things like sound, lighting, how it's filmed, what the choices they made and things like that. Acting, including the actor's choice of characterization and the way they speak and all that kind of stuff that goes into that. Writing, which can also kind of include characterization in a way because you have the dialogue and stuff. Obviously how the story flows, if it worked, the way that it was written, all that kind of stuff. Editing, how its effects used, transitioning, color, all that kind of stuff, like how it all affects the story and how it all tells the story. And then obviously overall tie it all together with how it, like, evaluating if the story was told well and what parts did work and didn't work. So right off the bat, Snatch has amazing editing. Even though I would rather keep that bit to the last bit, I just want to talk about it because it's so cool. There's so many good examples of how they use transitioning, very quick and abrupt transitioning, to up the speed and the pace of a scene to set the tone for the future of this sort of manic, like drugged up, like drive that this film has. You get that in the beginning when they're stealing the diamond. You also get it to like speed up characters' processes through the film. So for example, Cousin Avi is a character that comes up with the diamond heist start of the story, and he's trying to get the diamond to sell back in America. So Frankie Four Fingers is actually getting it for him, and then they're trying to price it, and then when they're trying to price it, it's when things go wrong. He has to travel to England to try and sort it out, and every time it happens they have this really cool little sequence that they keep using. It's really funny. sort of like, it still tells the story of how he gets there well, so that we know that he's not in America, he's in England. But it like condenses it really well and is quite funny because they keep using it, and yeah, I don't know, it's good. I like editing like that. Another really big thing about the editing is that, similar to Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, there's a very consistent color grading throughout the entire film. Very, very muted colors, almost grayscale sepia throughout the whole thing. It really adds to this grungy sort of setting, sort of exemplifies this like underlying grit in all the different characters and how that differs between them. It sort of also reminds you of like being in England and the grimy kind of streets and how everyone's sort of like not very positive and sad all the time, you know. It's sort of, it really does help the atmosphere of the film and the tone. And that's something we also see in Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, where there's a bunch of shot examples that I can think of where it just looks like it's been shot in like a sepia film or something. There's also just some interesting ways that different characters are introduced and things like that. And that sort of ties in with cinematography, which is really cool. There's a lot of car scenes in this film, and that's something that would be really difficult to film. And the way that the choices they make, a lot of over the shoulder shots, front on shots, where you can see what's going on in the front seats, you don't really have a big idea of what's going on in the back. And then when it's revealed, it's kind of funny. They do that in Lock, Stock, Two Smoking Barrels as well.
A shitload of cash. And a traffic warden.
So another thing that I noticed in the film that I really liked was the way that they played with focus and used depth of field to their advantage to do that. There's this one good scene where Bricktop comes to Turkish's apartment to confront him about the tipping that didn't quite work, and you're sort of expecting something really horrible to happen to him, for him to die or something like that, or to get beat up really badly. And there's this interesting conversation that him and Bricktop have while he's making Bricktop a cup of tea. And we get sort of like Turkish in the shot, and his foreground is blurry and out of focus, and he's making this tea. And you kind of think that maybe he has the upper hand in the conversation because it's sort of, yeah, because he's in focus and Bricktop isn't. But then like when Bricktop goes over his shoulder and then they're still talking, and then like suddenly the power shifts to Bricktop because the perspective changes to him. I don't know, it's just an interesting way to show the power dynamic in that conversation, and they do that a few times in the film. I'm just a sucker for depth of field, like manipulation. It's really cool and something that is really, I think, is really effective consistently. Although this doesn't really come under sound since it's separate to the whole like, to the on-set process. The soundtrack of this film is really cool, and I wanted to mention that. There was the same in Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels as well. They chose some really good British artists, and that really kind of like upped the energy of the scenes, and they again made a good condensing two different transitions and made them more interesting. For instance, they had a Stranglers song, 10cc, Oasis, Massive Attack, to name a few. One scene in particular that I liked, that just come under cinematography again, was how they had this really cool scene where they're at someone's house. I can't remember which character it was, and you see one of the characters in the window, and there's a very low angled shot up to him outside of the house, and we sort of get like a little, I think there's a little zoom, I can't remember, as it goes towards him, and then it switches to the inside of the house, and then we're looking where the characters are and how they're moving around and stuff. And that was pretty cool, like different sort of transition that they used. That wasn't just the cut, like the fast cuts that they were using earlier. It was a more interesting and more creative kind of choice to make. There's this like area in the film where a lot of violence and stuff takes place, and it's at this like pawnbrokers where one of the guys owns this like diamonds, this jewelers thing, this like knockoff jewelers thing, and he's doing this job for this guy called Morrison, and it's basically to try and get back this diamond off the Frankie Four Fingers. And they have a lot of surveillance cameras in the office that he works in, and it's really cool the way that they use the little TVs that they have there, and show some of what's happening with that without needing to have the extra camera there, and like really taking advantage of the space that they have and the resources that they have to do this sort of creative way of showing what's going on. The acting was really good. With these sort of movies, they tend to play on stereotypes a lot, so it's kind of quite dramatic and a little bit far-fetched sometimes, but it still works, like with the gangstery type stuff, like Bricktop's was an interesting characterization because he's not really, he's sort of passive-aggressive, even though he's very aggressive in what he says. He doesn't really like show a lot of anger.
I just had them polished.
And then when he's like talking to these guys that are trying to get the diamond, because Bricktop's sort of in between both of these stories, and he's kind of this like linking character that they have like a lot of the time Guy Ritchie uses to kind of link his different characters together and make it a lot more interesting, because they sort of interlace and then they don't, and then they kind of like work together but they don't. Like, it's really interesting, this sort of like playing off each other. For instance, there's this scene where like Bricktop's telling these guys how to properly dispose of a body, and he's famous for like feeding dead corpses to his pigs, and he's like telling them, okay, you need to cut them up into these many pieces and then like remove these things that the pigs can't digest properly, and then you have to have so many pigs, and then like they will consume so much flesh in this amount of time. And then, you know, he ends it off by saying, you know,
so be wary of any man who keeps a pig farm.
But it's a good example of how he kind of has this very like aggressive character, but the way that it's portrayed is not so dramatic and over the top. And then you have like Brad Pitt's characterization of the gypsy, which is really funny because it's so different to the other characters in the film. He made it onto a list of like the top 10 worst Irish accents in film. I think he was number 10 on, I think it was The Independent, which is funny. It's sort of like, they even talk about this in the article. The point is that you can't actually understand what he's saying half the time, and that's what they, like Turkish and his friend Tommy are always commenting on.
Did you understand a single word of what he just said?
My main issue comes under the writing category, and I've touched on this a little bit earlier. There's a massive similarity between Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels and Snatch, and I feel there could have been a little bit more variety between the two. The story is very, very similar. There's an issue with stealing stuff, and then there's an issue with money, which is what they have in Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels kind of thing. And they're very similar, like the two different storylines that you follow. It's a bit of a shame. I feel like it could have been a little bit different. I did feel that the editing was a step up from Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, so there was a little bit more variety there. Like, I rewatched Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels after I watched Snatch, and yeah, there was a definite difference between their transitioning and the choices there. And they might have even had more resources to do that, it being like 2 years after that was made and stuff. But yeah, it was interesting, the difference there. So I did feel that there was some variety there. It was just that the characters and the writing was very similar. The story was very similar. And I mean, it didn't massively affect it for me because I do really like Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels. I wonder how many times I've said that so far. Oh my god. However, for some other critics and stuff like that, that was a huge deal for them. For instance, Roger Ebert, who's quite a well-respected British or American journalist, I can't remember, or film critic. He had a few sort of choice words to say about Snatch. He rated it like 2 out of 4 or something, which is like, you know, not terrible, but it could be better. So like he said, you know, he said that it was a good example of style over substance. He said Mr. Ritchie seems to be stepping back when he should be stepping ahead. He said the movie is not boring, but it doesn't build or arrive anywhere. So I sort of agree with some of what he says and I disagree with others. I disagree with the style over substance thing because, like I said, the style of the whole film really does add to the story. The colour grading really adds to the gritty atmosphere. Transitioning really did add to the, like I said earlier and a few times, really quick cuts and the interesting ways that they chose to show different areas in different scenes. So like with the window scene with the surveillance cameras. It did add up and made the film more interesting to watch, and it made more sense to the storyline. And so I don't think that I don't think the substance was overlooked, but the style added to it, if that makes sense. I kind of understand what he's saying though, because I do agree with when he says that he felt that it didn't really arrive anywhere, but that it was building to something. I agree with that. The whole film I was waiting for something big to happen and it didn't, and my memory card is about to run out of. So yeah, throughout the film it was sort of feeling like it was building up to something, and then I don't really know when it was meant to be, when the climax, if this was right, but the climax moment felt like when like all of the different stories coincided, worked together. It was pretty funny, but didn't really feel like it should have been there. I don't know, it felt a bit out of place. Like, it did serve to tell the story, but it felt more like an homage to Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, because in Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, the story arc is beautiful. The way that it builds and builds and builds. Like, it's like all these extra stresses on all the different characters. More and more bad stuff is happening, like a very traditional story. And then there is a climax moment where it kind of feels like everything's gone wrong and then it kind of gets resolved. It happens in a good spot in the movie because there is enough time to have this resolution area part. Whereas in Snatch, it happened, I think, too early because there was just too much time for this resolution, and it kind of felt like the movie was dragged out a bit. It was a very funny climax because it sort of happens like this tiny thing that like Turkish and Tommy do, sets off all this crap that happens to the people with the diamond, and then at the end the diamond ends up back with. But yeah, like it just, the bit after that was kind of flat because it should have happened later. They should have cut it short a little bit. So I agree with Roger Ebert there that it kind of felt like it didn't really arrive anywhere and there wasn't really much of a point. But maybe there isn't meant to be a point, and it depends on how you feel about it. I disagree with Roger Ebert when he said that Ritchie was taking a step back and not a step forward. Because, as I said, the editing in Snatch was of a higher quality than it was in Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, and I felt like he made some more interesting choices. So even though there was a lot of similarities there and he probably should have branched out a little bit more, you know, it's still a step forward, it's not a step back. Just as an aside, something that made me happy was that the guy that played Spud in Trainspotting was in this movie, and he still basically plays the same character, but a little bit younger and not on heroin.
Fucking hell, my
Alright, mullet.
I guess, like, overall, movies are made to tell stories, right? They're like a form of storytelling that's involves a lot of different mediums and stuff like that, and that's their purpose. And Snatch definitely serves that purpose, and I think it does it very well. If you try and get over the fact that it's very similar to his last movie, and then maybe he should be more diverse with what he's doing, it's a good movie and it's enjoyable and it's funny. It made me laugh, and yeah, it's just a fun thing to watch. I gave this movie 4 out of 5 stars. I should mention that there is a TV series that's supposed to be based on the movie, and normally to give a well-rounded review of the things that I watch, I would watch the extra material that's based off it. Again, you see how I do that in The Handmaid's Tale in the next review that I do about the book and the movie and the TV series. I try and do it all in this like one video to give you a very like well-rounded review. From what I read, the TV series wasn't very similar at all to the movie. People were criticizing it because they believe that they took the title of it and you said that it was similar just to get publicity for it, and I don't know. So I didn't bother watching it. And yeah, that's basically all I wanted to say about the film. Like I said, it was really fun to watch, and if you like Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, you should give it a watch. And if you like Snatch, you should watch Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels. And I really hope that is the last time I have to say that title. I'm going to be doing a review on The Handmaid's Tale. I'll be doing the book, the movie from 1990, and the TV series. If you like this video, give it a like. If you want to stick around for some more content, give me a subscribe and hit that bell button. I would really appreciate any feedback that you have for me for this video. This is the first movie review I've ever done, like ever, and I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just winging it and seeing how it goes, and hopefully my format will work. But if you have any suggestions for future movie reviews, please let me know. Or just in general, I would really appreciate any comments that you have for me, positive or negative, it doesn't matter. I have an Instagram account, and I have a Goodreads account, and I have a Facebook page, so follow all 3, 1, 2, and you get constant updates about what I'm doing and when I'm uploading and things like that. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon with my Handmaid's Tale review.